Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. As you can see in the title of this video, we are going to address today historical claims made by Syria's President Bashar al-Assad on the era of World War II. Especially, he accused the Americans of aiding the Nazis against the communists. And he says, according to him, that only at the later stage of World War II, that the Americans jumped the wagon because they saw that the Soviets are winning World War II. He was speaking this in the context of wars of narratives, wars of information, and we know that during in the past few decades, the information warfare is very, very important in order to shape the public opinion and also shape the outcome of conflicts and wars. This is we're going to discuss in 20 minutes from now. And a special guest is coming to jump in and comment on this case from the United States. I saw him commenting on X on this particular video, and he agreed with President Bashar al-Assad. I'm probably a Syrian, and because I'm a person who opposed the so-called revolution in Syria or the CIA's regime change, or some people may say, Kevork, you are not neutral, you're not objective in this regard, therefore I wanted to host someone who is outside of this, let's say, the Syrian bubble. And let's see what he has to say in this regard. But since we're speaking about wars of narratives, guys, I just want to remind you of something very, very important that is going to happen soon. And it is about Julian Assange. Julian Assange is, of course, he doesn't need any introduction. He doesn't need any definition. He doesn't need any introduction for you to know where is he right now. He's in Belmarsh prison under harsh conditions, and his health, especially psychological health, has deteriorated in the past few months. And this is his last chance, guys, in February. So around 2 months from now, exactly 2 months from now, it's on the 28th and 21st of February 2024. This is a call to action. Julian Assange's final appeal to be held in the UK High Court, guys. The UK High Court has confirmed that a public hearing will take place on the 28th and 21st February 2024. The 2 day hearing may be the final chance for Julian Assange to prevent his extradition to the United States. If extradited, guys, Assange faces a sentence of 175 years for exposing war crimes committed by the United States in the Afghan and Iraq wars. And this is beyond Iraq and Afghan wars, guys. Also, it was in the case of Syria, Guatemala, and many other places. Immediately after the court date was announced, protesters responded by calling for a mass protest at the court on the day of the hearing at 8:30 a.m. They welcome all those who support press freedom to join them in London and around the world. Guys, if you're in the UK, if you're around London, I would kindly ask you to go to this demonstration, protest, and stand in front of the court hearing. And also, if you can, and let's see how this event will develop. If he is, if the rule out of if the ruling of the court was not to extradite him, then that would be great. If the court ruled that he has to be extradited to the United States, I think there should be other steps taken here to protect this journalist from being extradited to the empire, where they will kill him, whether torture him psychologically and kill him, or they will, of course, put him in a very dangerous prison for others to highly likely to kill him. Assange has been confined in the high security Belmarsh prison since he was arrested on a US extradition request on the 11th of April 2019. This will be his fifth Christmas in Belmarsh. The upcoming public hearing will be held before a panel of 2 judges who will review an earlier High Court decision taken by a single judge on the 6th of June 2023, which refused Mr. Assange permission to appeal. This decisive stage in Assange's appeal will determine one of two outcomes, guys. Whether Assange will have further opportunities to argue his case before the domestic UK courts, or whether he will have exhausted all appeals without a possibility for further appeal in the UK and thus enter the process of extradition. An application before the European Court of Human Rights remains a possibility. Assange's campaign for freedom is supported by Amnesty International, the National Union of Journalists, Reporters Without Borders, and virtually every civil rights, press freedom, and journalists union in the world. More than 70 Australian federal politicians have called on the US to drop the prosecution. In the United States, the congressional representatives calling for the case to be dropped grows steadily. Currently, H Resolution 934, sponsored by Paul Gosar, is gathering signatures from all sides of politics. John Rees of Free Assange campaign said the US is attempting to convict Julian Assange under the 1917 Espionage Act. If they get away with it, they will have succeeded in redefining journalism as spying. Every journalist will be intimidated. Every newspaper and broadcaster will look at material critical of the government and feel significant pressure not to publish for fear of prosecution and imprisonment. This is the most important press freedom case of the 21st century, and we need to ensure we do not lose any hard won freedoms. The wife of Julian Assange, who he married while in prison and who has been campaigning relentlessly for his freedom, said, "The last 4.5 years have taken the most considerable toll on Julian and his family, including our two young sons. His mental health and physical state have deteriorated significantly with the myriad of evidence that has come to light since the original hearing in 2019, such as the violation of the legal privilege and reports that senior US officials were involved in formulating assassination plots against my husband." This was the former CIA head of CIA, by the way, Mike Pompeo. "There is no denying that a fair trial, let alone Julian's safety on US soil, is an impossibility were he to be extradited." This is exactly what I said, guys. If he goes there, he will be suicided. "The prosecution of this innocent journalist and publisher must end." So, guys, I just want to give you here for media inquiries. If you guys have means as a journalist or you have a big platform and you want to shed light on this case, you can see that you have a website, freeassange.org, and also you have the email address assangetrial at the fagroup.com. So you can cover this case. I will definitely cover this case before the hearing, and also you can go to the website freeassange.org and donate also to the legal team of Julian Assange. This was very important, guys, before we jump in to the other parts of today's live stream. I just also want to mention something important. In the past, guys, episode, I said that I want a better countdown for my live streamings, and a few people already contacted me. But what caught my attention was a very professional email from a company called Stellar Videos, and they have sent me a very well, let's say, written and well proposed proposal, if it's correct to say. And they just and we have done also Zoom call. I have done Zoom call with them, and we agreed on the basics of the countdown. It will be 10 minutes. The theme will be, of course, geopolitical. I'm collecting some of the footage now because we need raw footage also from important political events such as the invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan, 9/11, Syria, Libya, meetings between different politicians, G7, BRICS, Putin shaking hands with MBS, and all this stuff. I want to put them all into this countdown, and the ending of this, let's say, countdown will be that Syriana Analysis presents knowledge, Syriana Analysis reveals political corruption, and calls for peace. This is going to be the countdown. Inshallah, it's going to come in the next weeks. It's a Christmas time as well. Everybody is also on vacation, but I'm preparing the material, the videos that I have to be sure that they don't have copyrights and also monetizable. So I have to take into consideration all these stuffs. And soon, hopefully at the beginning of January, we will have a very good, professional, brilliant countdown thanks to this company. Thank you very much, guys, for the others who sent me the emails. This was really professional, and their company, and they have an experience already. So I picked them, I chose them, and when it happens, I will also put the website of this company in the description below, so that if anyone wants similar services from a company, they can contact them. Now, yesterday, I broadcasted or played an interview with Dr. Daniela Ganzer. He's a Swiss historian and peace researcher. And during our conversation, of course, we addressed the Syrian case. And during the Syrian case, I asked him this simple question. This is it. So I said, since Syria was not posing a national security threat to the US, why has the latter waged a regime change war against Damascus and destroyed the country? So we will watch again this answer very quickly with him, which I posted today on X, and I will come back and I will tell you from which doctrine, what the United States, how the United States formulates its foreign policy regarding North Korea, regarding Russia, regarding China, regarding Iran, regarding Guatemala, regarding Nicaragua, regarding Syria, regarding any country that dissents against the United States. There are doctrines to be spoken about, and I have prepared that doctrine for you. I summarize it for you, and we will read it together and understand how the United States formulates its foreign policy. But first, let's watch again what he had to say about the Syrian case. Since I come from Syria, I have witnessed the what I call the US-led regime change war in Syria. It is called a revolution in the media. It is called an uprising against a dictatorship. In any ways, whatever the naming, the faming they are trying to do, the simple question here would be that every Syrian asks, why the United States decided to wage a regime change war against Syria? Why did they want to destroy Syria? Why this war happened at the first place when Syria was not posing a national security threat, for example, against the United States?
You know, that's a very fundamental question. It's a question that Vietnamese have asked themselves. Why were we bombed by the US? It's a question that Iranians have asked themselves. Why was Mossadegh, our prime minister, democratically elected prime minister, overthrown in 1953 by the British and by the American Secret Service, by the MI6 and the CIA? That's the question that people in Guatemala ask themselves. Why were we attacked? Arbenz, who was the president of Guatemala, he was overthrown by the CIA. That's what people in Nicaragua ask themselves. They say, why has the CIA armed the Contras? Why the Contras they're killing us? Why are they fighting against the Sandinistas? What's going on? What it's not the business of the CIA to intervene here in Nicaragua. That's the question that the people in Libya asked when the US started to bomb Libya in 2011, overthrew Gaddafi, and Gaddafi was later killed. I mean, come on, what right did Barack Obama have to bomb Libya? He had no right. No right. It was totally illegal. And that's the question people in Ukraine ask. Why did the US government overthrow the democratically elected leader in Ukraine in 2014? You know, it was a coup d'etat. It was not, you know, some peaceful people gathering on the Maidan. No. On 20 February 2014, we had snipers who killed both policemen and who killed demonstrators. So they killed both groups and created a lot of chaos. And that led to the overthrow of the government of Yanukovych. And it's many countries. Now, you're from Syria. You ask yourself, why did they attack us? And obviously, I have a whole list here of countries which were bombed, where we have regime change, etc. First of all, I want to say I'm very, very sorry. You know, I'm really sorry. It's big injustice that is happening here. Secondly, I see that the United States tried to project power. Okay, that's the idea. Projection of power means I control the world, and whoever disagrees with me is being killed, overthrown, whatever. Okay, we're not going to tolerate any opposition. And that is an idea which comes out of this insane plan to control the world. I mean, this question, you know, it comes up in me, and I say, why does anybody want to control the world? We're 8 billion people in 193 countries. How can one country control the world? Is it possible? And the answer is no, it's not possible. It's not possible. And okay, it happens again and again and again, but people now start to realize it. And one point I really want to make, Kevork, is we have 330 million people in the US. Most people in the US, they don't know nothing about all these wars. Nothing. And they are very decent, hardworking people. And they just have, and that's what I criticize, what I have to criticize, they have some blind trust in their government. So if US President Bush says we have to fight in Afghanistan, they say, Jesus Christ, that's a long distance. Where is Afghanistan anyway? Okay, they check it on the map, but they support the president because they think the president, he's probably a wise man. I tell you, he's not. Okay, he's not. He's working with the military industrial complex. The money that you spend on your military, you should use that in the US on your infrastructure. You should use it for your schools, for your hospitals. You should use that money for your really direct needs, and not to bomb Syria or attack Iraq or bomb Libya or bomb Serbia or bomb Vietnam or bomb Laos or bomb Cambodia or overthrow the government in Guatemala or overthrow the government in Chile. It's not good. So imperialism, as I describe it here in my book, is not only something which hurts the people in Syria or in Afghanistan, it also in the end hurts the people in the US. But I have to add, it's a very, very complicated discourse. It's very hard, if you start to realize that you've been lied to by the media,
Yes.
by CNN, by the New York Times, by the Washington Post, by Fox News, by MSNBC, everything. Like, I'm not saying everything they say is wrong. I'm not saying that. But the way they portray the wars of the Pentagon is always, there's a bad guy. His name is, and then fill in the blank. Okay, his name is Gaddafi. We gotta kill him. His name is Osama bin Laden. We gotta get rid of him. His name is Assad. We gotta get rid of him. They always
The boogeyman.
it's the boogeyman, and that's not how politics works. And so I'm very grateful for the work you do, because you offer people context. Context. We need context. We need, for instance, in the Syrian case, we need to explain, and I'm very happy that you explained that on your YouTube channel, that the CIA was arming radical Muslims in Syria in that Operation Timber Sycamore. I have it in my book.
Yes.
But most people have never heard of Operation Timber Sycamore.
The Syrians haven't heard about Timber Sycamore.
There you go. But Jeffrey Sachs, who's a professor in the USA, a very clever, very honest man, he spoke openly about Operation Timber Sycamore. And he said, okay, yes, the CIA invested many millions in Syria to arm radical Muslims. Then people were scratching their head and go like, are we not fighting the terrorists? Now, are we arming the terrorists? What is going on? And once you enter the details of international politics, you find out that under President Obama, terrorists were armed in Syria, and he called them freedom fighters.
Yes.
And under the presidency of Ronald Reagan, Al-Qaeda, that was in the 1980s, Al-Qaeda was armed in Afghanistan, and he called them freedom fighters. Now,
yes. So guys, this is not the wrong video. Somebody is asking me, this is not the wrong video. I already told you that at the beginning, if you were tuning in, that we will address Assad's statements in the second half of this live streaming, so in 10 minutes maximum. I showed you this video because it's important for us to understand how the United States formulates its foreign policy, and I told you that there are doctrines that the United States relies on in order to build its foreign policy. And the first doctrine that comes to my mind here is Wolfowitz Doctrine. Wolfowitz Doctrine is an unofficial name given to the initial version of the Defense Planning Guidance for the 1994 to 1999 fiscal years, published by the U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Paul Wolfowitz and his deputy Scooter Libby. Not intended for public release, it was leaked to the New York Times on March 1992 and sparked a public controversy about the U.S. foreign and defense policy. The document was widely criticized as imperialist, as the document outlined a policy of unilateralism and preemptive military action to suppress potential threats from other nations and prevent dictatorships from rising to superpower status. Such was the outcry that the document was hastily rewritten under the close supervision of U.S. Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Colin Powell before being officially released in 1992. Many of its tenets re-emerged in the Bush Doctrine, George W. Bush, by the way, which was described by Senator Edward Kennedy as a call for 21st century American imperialism that no other nation can or should accept. So this is one of the doctrines called Wolfowitz doctrine, and we have the second doctrine is the George Bush doctrine. The George Bush doctrine was leaked. The Wolfowitz doctrine was actually leaked to the media, and this is from the archives, guys. Okay, this is from the archives of the New York Times from 1992. U.S. strategy plan called for ensuring no rivals develop. So this is a newspaper, guys, from 1992 archive, and we have it in our hands here, and we can study this document and see how the United States in 21st century waged this what they call preemptive attacks, occupations, regime change wars. This is one of the doctrines that they relied and depended on in order to formulate their new foreign policy approaches. So let's start reading the summary of this doctrine, right? In a broad new policy statement that is in its final drafting stage, the Defense Department asserts that America's political and military mission in the post-Cold War era will be to ensure that no rival superpower is allowed to emerge in Western Europe, Asia, or the territory of the former Soviet Union. The classified document makes the case for a war dominated by one superpower, whose position can be perpetrated by constructive behavior and sufficient military might to deter any nation or group of nations from challenging American primacy. With its focus on this concept of benevolent domination by one power, the Pentagon document articulates the clearest rejection to date of collective internationalism, the strategy that emerged from World War II when the five victorious powers sought to form a United Nations that could mediate disputes and police outbreaks of violence. The policy draft is a detailed justification for the Bush administration's quote base force proposal to support a 1.6 million member military over the next 5 years at a cost at about $1.2 trillion. Implicitly, the document foresees building a world security arrangement that preempts Germany and Japan from pursuing a course of substantial rearmament, especially nuclear armament, in the future. In its opening paragraph, the policy document heralds the less visible victory at the end of the Cold War, which it defines as the integration of Germany and Japan into a US led system of collective security and the creation of a democratic zone of peace. The continuation of this strategic goal explains the strong emphasis elsewhere in the document and in the other Pentagon planning on using military force, if necessary, to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in such countries as North Korea, Iraq, some of the successor republics of the Soviet Union, and in Europe. Nuclear proliferation, if unchecked by superpower action, could tempt Germany, Japan, and other industrial powers to acquire nuclear weapons to deter attacks from regional foes. This could start them down the road to global competition with the United States and, in a crisis over national interests, military rivalry. What is most important, it says, is, quote, the sense that the world order is ultimately backed by the US, and the United States should be postured to act independently when collective action cannot be orchestrated or in a crisis that demands quick response. The new draft sketches a world in which there is one dominant military power whose leaders must maintain the mechanisms for deterring potential competitors from even aspiring to a larger regional or global role. So guys, this is exactly what is happening nowadays. This is a continuation of a doctrine that Wolfowitz's doctrine today in the 21st century in 2023. Maybe there was some modification over it, of course, and later also George Bush made some of the modifications that I'm going to come next and see how George Bush built on this doctrine, the Wolfowitz doctrine, to invade Afghanistan, to invade later Iraq, and also gave the green light for Israel to invade Lebanon in 2006. For the first time since the defense planning guidance process was initiated to shape national security policy, the new draft states that the fragmentation of the former Soviet military establishment has eliminated the capacity for any successive power to wage global conventional war. But the document qualifies its assessment saying, we do not dismiss the risks to stability in Europe from a nationalist backlash in Russia or effort to reincorporate into Russia the newly independent republics of Ukraine, Belarus, and possibly others. American strategic nuclear weapons will continue to target vital aspects of the former Soviet military establishment. The rationale for the continuation of this targeting policy is that the United States must continue to hold at risk those assets and capabilities that current and future Russian leaders or other nuclear adversaries value most, because Russia will remain the only power in the world with the capability of destroying the United States. And now we can see, according to this let's say doctrine, how the United States perceived the rise of Russia on the global scene, and how the United States perceived the rise of Russia after Putin to gain its former status as a superpower. Then came George W. Bush, and he built on Wolfowitz's doctrine, and he made new adjustments on this doctrine, and those are one of the main points of the Bush doctrine. Make no distinction between terrorists and the nations that harbor them and hold both to account. Take to fight to the enemy overseas before they attack us again here at home. 3. Confront threats before they fully materialize. And lastly, advance liberty and hope as an alternative to the enemy's ideology of repression and fear. Characteristics of Bush doctrine. It's a doctrine of unrivaled military supremacy, a doctrine of preemptive or preventive war, and its willingness to act unilaterally if multilateral cooperation cannot be achieved. And based on that, you can see what happened, right, in the past decade or two in the Middle East, in West Asia, in Far East Asia, regarding the American involvement in this regard. Now, as I promised you guys, I'm joined by a special guest from the United States. His microphone is still, I think, muted. Ghost of Base Patrick Henry, how are you doing?
Hey, Kevork, how are you? You can call me Gordon. Gordon or Ghost, whichever one. But thanks for having me, man. I'm a big fan of your work.
Bro, we have been following to each other now a few months, I believe, and I'm really happy to see your comments on X. It shows lots of knowledge about an area that, you know, in the United States you guys are really far away, and I like to create bridges, you know, with Americans, with Europeans. We probably disagree on many things, but at the same time we have mutual ground to agree upon different cases. And if we try to build bridges, I truly believe that we can create a situation that there is sustainable peace. Because if we can sell the narrative, because today we're speaking about wars of narratives, right? This is something also Assad spoke in this last video that you were commenting on. Wars of narratives. Like if you say sometimes I receive comments under my X, and they call me like, oh, you coming from the desert, you go back to your shithole, you mistreat women and all this stuff. You know, it's a narrative, but we can counter that narrative with another narrative, and that's why I really wanted to host you to comment on what Assad said in this regard, and I found it fascinating that you agreed with him. I myself, I'm not an expert in World War II or history. I don't know all the details of what happened in World War II. We studied at school. I would say the basics, the headlines, but I'm also one of the people who follow the Hollywood. I follow all the documentaries that are published by the Netflix and all this stuff. So of course I had a different perception of what happened in World War II than what Assad said. I would like to play the video of Assad. It's 3.5 minutes, and then we comment on this video together. Okay, let me just play this video, guys, for Assad to you, and we will see what he said about the era of World War II and the information warfare in this regard.
ما يتقاطع بين الحرب السورية والحرب في فلسطين والحرب في أوكرانيا والحرب في الصين، بحر الصين الجنوبي، وفي فنزويلا وغيرها. كل حروب الغرب وتحديدا أمريكا تستند بالدرجة الثانية إلى السيطرة على الأرض، ولكن بالدرجة الأولى إلى السيطرة على الحقيقة. اليوم الحرب هي حرب الحقيقة. ومن يربح الحقيقة، طبعا الحقيقة بغض النظر إن كانت حقيقية أو مزورة، هو من يربح الحرب والمعركة. لذلك أكثر ما أرعب الخونة في سوريا في بداية الحرب أن يعرف العالم، وأن يعرف السوري تحديدا وليس العالم، بأنهم خونة، وأن يعرف السوري بأن الإرهابي هو مرتزق وليس ثائر. وأكثر ما يرعب إسرائيل اليوم في العالم أن يعرف العالم حقيقتها الإرهابية. لذلك المعركة هي معركة الحقيقة اليوم، ويجب أن نعرف بأن الولايات المتحدة سيطرت على العالم قبل الدولار وقبل الأساطيل بالحقيقة، وبدأت هذه الحقيقة منذ الحرب العالمية الثانية. فكلنا تعلمنا وعشنا من خلال الأفلام والروايات والقراءات بأن الغرب هو عدو النازية، ونسينا بأن النازية هي العدو الأساسي لروسيا الاتحاد السوفيتي في ذلك الوقت. أغلبنا لا يعرف بأن صعود النازية بين الحرب العالمية الأولى والثانية هو كان بدعم أمريكي. الكل يتساءل طيب كيف كان هناك يعني انهيار ألماني وقيود أوروبية، كيف سمحوا للنازية بالصعود وتأسيس جيش؟ بالدعم الأمريكي، بالأموال الأمريكية، بالقروض، بالاستثمارات. أعتقد حتى شركة فورد استثمرت، وبقيت الاستثمارات بعد بدء الحرب، وبقي الدعم بعد بدء الحرب، أعتقد ربما خلال العام الأول. وعندما تغيرت الخطة النازية تغير الدعم الغربي، وأظهرت أوروبا بأنها ضد تلك الحرب. تتمت هذه الرواية أن الكل يعتقد بأن الغرب انتصر على النازية في إنزال النورماندي، هذا الإنزال العظيم. والقلة تعرف بأن هزيمة هتلر بدأت في عام 1941 على أسوار موسكو بعد عامين تقريبا من بدء الحرب، ولم تكن القوى الغربية خاصة الولايات المتحدة تقوم بأي عمل ضد النازية. وكان ستالين يطالب أمريكا بالتدخل وهي ترفض. كانت تريد من النازية والشيوعية أن يدمروا بعضهم البعض، فتسيطر أمريكا على أوروبا بعد أن تكون أوروبا أيضا قد دمرت. والمرحلة الثانية للانتصار الروسي كان عام 1942 بعد حصار ستالينغراد وبدء الهجوم الروسي المعاكس الكبير، واستمر الهجوم الروسي حتى صيف 1944، يعني تقريبا 3 سنوات والغرب لم يقاتل النازية، وأقصد تحديدا أمريكا وليس الغرب بشكل عام. عندما اكتشفوا بأن الروسي يعني قاب قوسين أو أدنى من الانتصار، قرر الهجوم واختطاف الانتصار ومنع الروسي من التقدم باتجاه أوروبا الشرقية ألمانيا وغيرها. هذا هو سبب الهجوم. التتمة أن محاكمات نورنبرغ المشهورة كانت للقادة النازيين الذين رفضوا التعاون مع أمريكا، أما كل من تعاون عزز وكرم في أمريكا وفي الدول الغربية. أول الصواريخ الأمريكية صنعها النازيون الألمان. الناتو أسس على أيدي الضباط الألمان. حاكم المصرف المركزي الألماني أقرب شخصية لهتلر عاش معزز مكرم في أمريكا. قادة النازيين الأوكران ومنهم قادة منظمة بانديرا توفوا ما بين ألمانيا نفسها الغربية وأمريكا.
Gordon, those are really big claims by President Assad. Before we discuss the details of what he said, he also mentioned at the beginning about the information narrative warfare. In your opinion, how much detrimental is the war of narratives in shaping the outcome of conflicts? We know that it shapes public opinion, but does it really shape the outcome of a conflict? For example, we have now recently the war in Ukraine, we have the war in the Gaza Strip. How can the narrative war or shaping public opinions can change the outcome of the war? Just for your microphone is I think it's muted. Yeah.
Yes, muted. I think he's 100% correct. Narrative warfare is extremely real. I think it is the modern iteration of warfare. The group that I collaborate with, Badlands Media, we talk about this all the time. We talk about the war of stories, the war of narratives. General Flynn, who's a big figure in our political movement in America, he talks about this all the time. He's published books about this where he's trying to educate people on how modern warfare is actually fought through narratives and through stories, because you're trying to convince populations to go along with agendas that are being run by really a small group of people who are in power. And one of my colleagues likes to say that all kinetic wars are actually a result of a lost information war, a narrative war. And there's probably some truth to that. So yes, I do think that narrative warfare is very real. I think that it's used by the media to control, manipulate opinions. I think the military and probably more importantly, the intelligence community manipulates the media in order to get their narrative or their story out there. And I will confess that I used to be a victim of narrative warfare because I used to believe the lies that they told, especially when it came to the conflict between America and the Middle East. It was about a year ago that I learned about the Hashemites from World War I and the way they were betrayed by the British in America at the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. And we can start talking about what Assad was saying, I think, based on that, if you want me to talk about what Assad was talking about.
By the way, you are also on Rumble, right?
Yes.
You are the co-host of Badlands Media. Am I pronouncing it correct? So
Yes.
this is one of the why I'm saying this, because there are so many suppression nowadays on YouTube and other social media platforms. Therefore, I agree with you that narratives are very important. And were it not important, shaping public opinions were not important, they wouldn't mind suppressing people, shadow banning people, deplatforming people, because it is effective, it is impactful. And there is someone like Julian Assange is rotting in the jail because of reports and documents he published nowadays. So people nowadays underestimate, I would say, the power of the narratives, and they come and say, what are you going to do? Are you going to change the words by what you say on YouTube? I'm not going to change the word, but if you light one candle in darkness and other people also light a candle in darkness, then we will see a brighter future for the next generation. Because to be honest with you, our generation has lived a lot of difficulties and lots of wars due to the false narratives that some of the establishments have pushed upon. Now, Assad made a really controversial, in my opinion, claim. He said the rise of Nazism between World War I and World War II was with the support of the United States. You agreed with him. Can you please explain that?
Yes. So at the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, at the end of World War I, they all met in Paris to discuss what was going to happen to Europe now that Germany had lost. The Dulles brothers, who were lawyers who worked for a law firm called Sullivan and Cromwell, they were really at the core of these negotiations, and they helped set up the conditions, the sanctions that were then visited onto Germany that created a very, very difficult situation for the German people to ever achieve prosperity again. They experienced hyperinflation in about a course of a year, maybe a year and a half. The cost of bread went from a few dollars to about $1 million of their money. So they were experiencing devastating hyperinflation, devastating economic sanctions that were imposed on them by this group, really this group of international players, Britain, France, America. But the Dulles brothers were sitting at the table. They were the ones really writing the documents. Now, the Dulles brothers would go on in 1947 to form the CIA. They were also involved, by the way, in the assassination of JFK and the cover-up of assassinating JFK. So they're at the heart of all this stuff. Now, in the 1920s and early 1930s, the Sullivan and Cromwell, the law firm I mentioned before, prior to the CIA existing, Sullivan and Cromwell was doing a lot of the intelligence work, intelligence gathering, rather, for the nefarious political elements in the American government. Then they just went ahead and formed the CIA, and the guys from that law firm joined them. So they were using a bank in the Netherlands to launder and send money from America to Germany. And the people who were receiving this money through the bank in the Netherlands were using it to purchase businesses around Germany and then consolidate those businesses into a giant monopoly. This is the same thing they did in America in the late 1800s. They were called robber barons. And the people who came up with the concept, it's called a holding company, a parent company. Google is a parent company. Or I'm sorry, Alphabet is the parent company that owns Google. The guy who invented the concept of a holding company, Cromwell. who started the law firm Sullivan and Cromwell. So the guy who started the law firm that became the CIA invented the legal instrument of the holding company, which allowed monopolies to form, which is fascism. So all these guys are fascists. All the guys who started the CIA, they're all fascists. They're sympathetic to the Germans in the Nazis in Germany, who are also fascists. They're sending them money. Those guys are taking the money. They're purchasing businesses, and they're consolidating the businesses into one giant monopoly. And then those monopolies are forming relationships with the Nazi party to implement Nazi Germany, which is the fascist Nazi Germany, which obviously fascism is it's a big lie that fascism is is the right wing and communism is the left wing. Really what it was is you had the communists take over Germany after World War I because of the horrible economic conditions. The communists come to power. So the fascists, the Nazis, actually defeat the communists in Germany and take control. They were both left-wing. We would say left-wing, which left-wing meaning they liked a big, strong government. They didn't want there to be private industry. The fascists were just less left-wing. They were more right than the communists were, more right-wing, which is why they say, oh, well, they're the right-wing. They're not really right-wing. They're all left-wing. They're all pro-tyranny. They're all pro-totalitarianism, pro-big government. And by the way, the agent who was laundering the money through the Netherlands from America to Germany, Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush. He was an oil man in Texas who was using his oil business in Texas to help clean the money, launder it, and send it to Germany. So
do we know the name of the bank?
Connected.
Do we know the name of the bank? One of the
I believe it's called Pershing Brown. Pershing Brown Banking, I believe, is what it's called, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Charles Pershing Brown, I believe, is the guy. Pershing Brown Bank. Yeah, so Pershing Brown is the name of the bank. So
I think this is very, very important context about this case that I myself wasn't aware of, and I'm specifically talking about what you said about the money laundering and helping the Nazis between World War I and World War II. At the same time, Assad, in my opinion, if I take it from the full context of what he said, he basically, I'm paraphrasing him, that there was the Americans were conspiring, let's say, and so that the Nazis and the communists destroy each other. And when Europe gets destroyed and is weak, the US emerges as an hegemon in Europe. Like, were they neutral? Were they watching? Because the intention here is important, right? Like, the American side was watching this World War II so that they can see both sides were mutually destroying each other, and Europe gets weakened so that the United States presents itself as a hegemon over the continent. Because this also, if I draw parallel now with the Ukraine war, it seems that this was again a war but this time between the Ukrainians and the Russians to mutually destroy each other and weaken Europe at the same time. And now we can see that Europe doesn't have an independent foreign policy. They have become a collective West. Like, all of them are moving as one bloc. Whether against the Russian side or against the Chinese side.
Yes, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. To say that America was neutral, there's some truth to that. So the same guys, like the Dulles brothers, the same group of fascists who are allies with the Germans, basically, allies with the Nazis, they also, during World War I, helped fund the Bolsheviks in Russia. So the same people who were sending money to the Germans later first sent money to the Bolsheviks in Russia to overthrow the Tsar and bring in the communist revolution in Russia. And basically, to your point, to Assad's point, they were playing all sides. They wanted the communists to overthrow Russia and then basically invade Europe. They wanted the fascists in Germany to fight them, and for the conflict between the two sides to destroy Europe, which is what it did. It did destroy Europe. And really, the politics of World War I and what happened after World War I at the Treaty of Versailles is much more important than what happened in World War II and the politics of what happened after World War II. Because World War I set up Europe in the world, really, for what's happening right now. The British and the French drew the political boundary lines of the Middle East at the Treaty of Versailles.
Yes.
So they drew the political lines of Syria, of Iraq, and they did this without consulting really with the Arabs, without consulting with the Hashemites, who they had promised to give the entire region to the Hashemites and say, this is going to be yours. You helped us fight the Ottomans. It's yours now. And the Hashemites didn't really trust them, but what choice did they have? And so the Hashemites get betrayed. Syria, I mean, has been, it's devastating what's happened to Syria ever since then, because I think Syria has really been abused, as has, many other countries, including America. The American people have been abused by these people. We all have the same enemy, and the same enemy are this group of people. They're an international group who has tried to pit us against one another and convince us that we need to destroy each other, and then they can rule over the ashes. And so right now, what I'm trying to fight against is these lies that have been told to the Americans that, the Muslims in the Middle East want to destroy America and kill every Christian in America. And it's just not true. I know it's not true. And so that's how they cultivate an appetite among Americans to instead come to the Middle East and destroy the Middle East. And so
Gordon,
that's
one
where
day,
narrative warfare becomes very important.
Gordon, one day we have to go together to Syria. And
Yes.
We have to do an experiment, and just ask 100 people in the street randomly that you're just a lone American here in the streets, and see the reactions of these people. Despite that, if you open Syrian TV, state TV, day and night, they're saying American imperialism doing this to us, American government is doing that to us. But when you go there, people were like, "Oh, you're welcome, ahla wa sahla," and they want to invite you to food. They want to invite you to beer and or tea or whatever, right? There is always big awareness. I'm not speaking about the entire Middle East. I was born and raised in Syria, and there is enough political awareness and knowledge of what's happening around the world. People study at school World War I, World War II. They study context. They study different conflicts in the region. And when I was studying international relations and diplomacy in English in Syria, in Damascus, my professors were not Syrians. Some of them were Americans, some of them were Germans, and we were studying American books. And in these American books, it's written Syria is part of the axis of evil and all the stuff that George W. Bush back then was saying about Syria. And they told us, I still remember, guys, those are American books. You take the theories from it, take the basics, and if other things that contradict with your beliefs, just don't adopt it. Be critical of what you're reading, right? This was really, really important approach, in my opinion, how they educated a good generation of students from political science and international relations in Syria, so that they can understand the American perspective. And this is what I was doing before you joined. I explained the Bush doctrine. I explained the Wolfowitz doctrine, that some of the foreign policies of the United States nowadays is still dependent on. If we go back a little bit again to World War II, Assad was talking about the Normandy landing in June 1994. This was the U-turn or the shift that happened in the American approach in World War II. What has changed that the Americans jumped the wagon militarily and used excessive hard power on the side, let's say, of the communists against the Nazis in World War II?
Well, that's a good question, and there's a lot of speculation as to why the fascists turned in America seem to have turned against Hitler. The best guess that I have, just from all the research and I've seen, and I don't know if I'm right or not, but I think what happened is they understood that the Germans were going to lose in Europe. Ultimately, they were going to lose. They reached a certain point. The Russians were just, to what Assad said, the Russians were beating them. In 1941, Hitler tried to invade Moscow in June, which is like the worst month to go invade Russia. He should have studied Napoleon to know that. So you reach Moscow by winter, by December, and then you've been trugging through mud all the way to Moscow, and then the Russians decide to launch their counterattack, and they just end up driving the Germans right out of Russia. And then they turn around the next year in 1942 and try to go down to Stalingrad in the south and invade Stalingrad. That's a year-long campaign. Same thing happens. Or they get to Stalingrad finally, and then the Russians envelop them in a double envelope, flank them, and destroy them. And then the third really big defeat was Kursk later in the summer in 1943. That was kind of like in between Stalingrad and Moscow. The largest tank battle in history. The largest tank battle was between Russia and Nazi Germany. The Russians won, and so because of that victory, the Germans had to move their entire Second Corps Panzer division out of France and into the Eastern Front. Like half their tanks they had to move into the Eastern Front. And then in November of 1943, they meet in Tehran. Stalin, Roosevelt, Churchill, they all meet in Tehran in Iran. And Roosevelt promises, like Stalin's like, when are y'all going to get involved? You said you were going to invade Europe. When are you going to do it? And they said, okay, we will be there in May of 1944. We'll finally get there. And he said, okay. So then a month later, Stalin launches the Dnieper Carpathian campaign, which forces Germany to pull even more people out of Normandy and put them on the east. So by the time the Americans finally invade Normandy in June of 1944, so many Germans have been pulled out of Normandy and pulled out of France that the invasion was much easier. Had Germany been at full force, the invasion probably would have failed, or could have easily failed. So it's because of the Russians pulling so many Germans out of France that the Americans were able to invade Normandy, and then it was just a matter of time that and once the Normandy invasion succeeded, it was very obvious. Even before then, it was obvious to the Germans, to the German high command, that they were going to lose. So I think what they did is they decided to strategically surrender, strategically lose World War II on the ground in Europe, but then take their technology, take the research they had been doing in secret, and leave the continent and go to America and go to Argentina and go to probably even Antarctica. There's a lot of evidence to show that they had set up military bases in Antarctica. And these technologies they had are very likely what we call UFOs, what we call, flying saucers. Very likely that's probably Nazi technology that they developed at the end of World War II that they didn't want the world to find out about. So they took it with them. And then Assad describes the Nuremberg trials being for the Nazi leaders who wouldn't collaborate with America. America did something called the Operation Paperclip, where they took all of the most important scientists, the most important intelligence officers, and they brought them to America, and they used them to form NASA, to form the CIA, to form basically what we're fighting against right now. The people who formed NASA, Wernher von Braun, who sent us to the moon, was a Nazi scientist. Wow. So he was building rockets for the Nazis, and then he turned around and built the first space shuttle that went to the moon. So these are all Nazi leaders, and then they turn around and become heroes in America, and then American historians rewrite history to say, oh yeah, these guys were actually heroes, and they're Americans now, and we accept them, but really they're Nazi leaders from World War II, and they became superstars in the American government. And now the seeds that were planted in America after World War II have blossomed and grown into what has now come for your country in the Middle East. And it's fascism. It's totalitarianism. It's what they are. It's what they do.
Actually, one of the let's say Nazi collaborators was Bandera. Bandera later escaped Ukraine, and he lived in Munich for many years. And the Americans collaborated with him, but not directly. They had their channels, but the Brits, the MI6, they were collaborating with him directly, and they tasked him for organizing resistance against the Soviet Union after World War II. Bandera was recruiting people in Ukraine against the Soviet Union and against the Russians, and then he was assassinated by the Russian intelligence in Munich. And we're speaking about West Germany, the Germany which was liberated from the Nazis. So what you're saying is very, very eye-opening. Actually, I have never heard about all these details. It's mind-boggling, and it makes you also understand in a better way what's happening nowadays in the Ukraine war, right? And also what happened in the Canadian Parliament for receiving and applauding the former SS Waffen officer, right?
Yes, correct. It's all that's connected. And to that point, I mean, British intelligence, they played a big role in the betrayal of the Arab people by the West. They were at the heart of all that. And then the CIA has kind of picked up the mantle. The CIA was created by British intelligence, trained by British intelligence. And the CIA now is actually what is brainwashing people in the Middle East to hate America, and brainwashing people in America to hate the Middle East, and that, like, cultivating these conditions for war so that people are motivated to join the army and go kill each other. So we have to deprogram that and stop it.
Yeah. Guys, this is the X account of Gordon. It's already in the description below, just for you also to see on X how it looks like. And also, he is a co-host of Badlands Media. Again, the Rumble link is in the description below. I will mention something before I end up this conversation. This is just for the audience, guys. On this channel, I host people from left wing. I host people who are communists and they preach communism day and night. On this channel, I host conservatives. I host right-wing people. I host centrist people. You do not have always to agree with everything they say. And at the same time, you will always find a mutual ground between them. I spoke with the founder of the Communist Party in the UK, and I found some things that he said which made sense for me. And then I sit with people who are conservatives, whether in Europe or in the United States, and I find myself in some of the aspects of what they say, it makes sense for me. So I do not make myself like an exclusive. I would say, oh, I'm a left wing and I have to understand everything from the left wing or a communist or whatever approach on the international politics, or I'm a conservative or a centrist. No. I just put the facts in front of me. I read, I listen to other people, I learn from them, I try to find a bridge. So there were so many people agreeing, and some of the people were saying, no, I don't agree, Yeah, you don't agree, that's fine. We have to disagree sometimes with each other, right? And sometimes other guests I host that I disagree with them, but it's not my style to like brutally push back against. No, I'm here to listen to someone else's opinion. I'm very, very grateful, Gordon, for the time that you dedicated for me and the audience of Syriana Analysis. And I would encourage you guys to follow also the podcast that he is co-hosting on Rumble. Again, I'm also on Rumble, but at the same time, I'm broadcasting on YouTube. Until this moment, I'm not deplatformed yet from YouTube, so still we're operating here. And also the X, he's making really good, really great comments on the West Asia or Middle Eastern politics. Just listen to what he says and try to critically think and analyze what he's saying. I think it's important to listen to other people. Gordon, thank you so much again for being my guest, bro.
I agree with everything you just said, and thank you for having me. I hope we can do it again soon.
We will hopefully in the future go to Syria together and see the situation there. I think that would be a great start. Yeah. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I really appreciate all of you for tuning in and watching it from the beginning. We spoke about the doctrines of the American foreign policy at the beginning, and then we addressed Assad's new speech about World War II, Nazis, communists, and all this stuff with Gordon. And I will see you tomorrow, guys. If you want to support my independent work, you can see on the screen www.patreon.com/Syriana Analysis, and I will see you tomorrow. Salam.
See you.